By 1853, San Francisco held 30,000 Chinese residents. 1 in 5 of them visited an opium den every day. That estimate came from the city's own coroner, who tallied deaths among the Chinese community and noted how many bodies carried the smell of poppy smoke. The dens were not merely criminal hideaways. They were complex social sanctuaries where men who had crossed the Pacific alone found a bed, a meal, and a moment of escape from the brutal labor of the goldfields. A newcomer could rent a bunk for the night, share news from Guangdong, and smoke a pipe without the fear of harassment that followed him on the streets. The dens operated in plain sight, tucked behind storefronts on DuPont Street, now Grant Avenue, and when the law finally came for them, many were simply sealed shut. Today, the ruins of those dens still lie buried under the sidewalks of modern Chinatown. A sewer repair crew in 2012 found a clay pipe and a tin of hardened opium just 3 feet below the asphalt. The forgotten civilization had never really left. Ah Sing stepped off the ship at Meig's Wharf on a foggy morning in 1852. He wrote a letter to his brother in Guangdong describing the chaos, the shouts of stevedores, the stench of rotting fish, and the sight of white men carrying gold dust in leather pouches. Within 3 days, he found his way to a cramped boarding house on DuPont Street. The building was narrow, 3 stories tall, and every room held a dozen men sleeping in shifts. The woman who ran it was known only as Mother Lee. She served rice and salted fish twice a day, and after dark she unlocked a back room where oil lamps burned low. The 1854 San Francisco census listed 14 opium dens by street address on DuPont Street alone. Ah Sing's boarding house was one of them. He shared a 6-foot bunk with 2 other men. A clay pipe rested on the shelf above his head, and a tin of prepared opium sat beside a spirit lamp. He had never smoked before he left China, but in San Francisco, the smoke was the only thing that made the cold and the loneliness bearable. An 1856 police department report on opium smoking houses described the typical interior. Each den held rows of 6-foot-long bunks, fitted with 2 thin pillows and a spirit lamp. The implements were simple and precise. The opium pipe was made of baked clay, with a wide bowl that held a pea-sized pill of cooked opium. The yen-shi scraper cleaned the residue from the pipe bowl. A small brass spoon, called a cooking spoon, heated the raw opium over the lamp until it bubbled into a thick syrup. The smoker rolled a single pill between his fingers, placed it in the pipe, and held the bowl over the flame. The smoke was sweet and heavy. At 723 DuPont Street, an 1859 newspaper description called the interior a low, gloomy cellar with an earthen floor and walls blackened by years of lamp smoke. The ceiling was so low that a man could not stand upright. 12 bunks lined the walls, each separated by a thin wooden partition. A single candle flickered near the door. The air was thick with the smell of poppy syrup and unwashed bodies. Men lay on their sides, facing the lamps, silent except for the occasional hiss of the flame. The 1860 U.S. Census for San Francisco counted 2,719 Chinese residents. In the occupation column, 47 men were listed simply as opium smoker. That number was low. Many gave other work to the census taker. But inside the dens, the city's divisions dissolved into smoke. Not everyone lying on a bamboo bunk was a Chinese laborer. 9 Whiskey Jim Riley owned a saloon on Pacific Street. In 1863, he began selling small brass pipe tokens at his bar. A token bought 1 smoke at any of 4 dens he had partnered with. His customers were white merchants, gamblers, policemen, and a few sailors. They entered through a side door, paid the token, and took a bunk near the front. The unwritten code was simple. White smokers stayed in the outer room. Chinese laborers used the inner hall. No one spoke of it. The hierarchy of the smoke itself ran deeper than skin. A laborer scraped together a few coins for the cheapest grade, tarry, black opium boiled from crude poppy extract. It burned harsh and left a bitter aftertaste. A wealthy Chinese merchant, by contrast, ordered purified Chandu shipped directly from Penang or Singapore. The Chandu arrived in small porcelain jars sealed with wax. A single pill cost as much as a laborer earned in a day. The merchant smoked it in a private alcove, attended by a boy who heated the pipe and handed him the stem. Ah Sing watched this from his own bunk near the back wall. He saw a white policeman sit 2 bunks away, his uniform coat folded under his head. The policeman did not look at anyone. He smoked, stared at the ceiling, and left without a word. In that dark room, the city's walls held no difference. The smoke was the only currency. In 1875, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors passed the nation's first citywide ordinance against opium smoking houses. The law forbade any person to keep or maintain a room where opium was smoked within the city limits. The penalty was a fine of up to $500 or 6 months in the county jail. The dens did not close. They simply moved their front doors deeper into shadow. 3 years later, in March 1878, police raided a den on Jackson Street owned by a man named Lee Tong. He was arrested, charged, and convicted in the police court. Lee Tong appealed. His lawyer argued that the ordinance was unconstitutional, that it violated a man's right to use his property as he wished. The case reached the California Supreme Court. On July 12, 1878, the court ruled. The decision was unanimous. The ordinance was valid. The justices wrote that opium smoking houses were public nuisances and that the city had the right to regulate them. They cited the smoke itself, the crowds, and the moral decay that followed. The phrase public nuisance stuck. It became the legal hammer the police used for the next 3 decades. Ah Sing learned of the ruling from a newspaper read aloud in the grocery. His fellow laborers listened in silence. The dens would not disappear, they knew, but the law had drawn a line. Men like Lee Tong now faced prison, not just fines. The price of a pipe would rise. The smoke would become harder to find. Some men stayed away. Others, like Ah Sing, moved deeper into the warren of rooms that lay beneath the street. The dens burrowed. After the 1875 ordinance, a new geography took shape underground. Sub-basements, abandoned cisterns, tunnels cut between buildings. A single hatch in a fish market on Jackson Street led to a crawl space that held 20 bunks, each barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. July 1880, the Daily Alta California reported a raid on a den at 721 Jackson Street. The reporter described the entrance: a grocer's back room stacked with sacks of rice and dried shrimp, a wooden trapdoor hidden under the largest sack. Police lifted the sack, pulled the door, and found a ladder descending 12 feet into darkness. Below were 26 bunks. The air was so thick with smoke that the officers used lanterns to see. 14 men lay there, some so drowsy they did not notice the raid. The grocer was arrested. He said he charged each smoker 10 cents for the use of the room, the opium they brought themselves. By 1884, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors ordered a detailed map of all cellars and sub-basements in Chinatown. Surveyors counted 37 undisclosed rooms marked on the final map as opium retreats. The map showed rooms behind false walls, rooms accessible only through latched panels in clothing shops, rooms connected by narrow passages wide enough for one man to crawl. The city knew, the police knew, but every time one door was sealed, another appeared. Na Sing found his way to a den behind a tailor's shop on DuPont Street. He entered through a closet, stepped down 3 stone steps, and sat on a bunk that still held the warmth of the man before him. The lamp was already lit. The pipe was clean. He rolled his pill and breathed. Above, the street went on as if nothing lay beneath. Ah Sing lay on the bamboo mat and watched the lamp flame flicker. The den was quiet except for the soft bubble of a pipe across the room. He picked up the needle, dipped it into the tin of prepared opium, and rolled a small pill between his fingers, the size of a pea. He held it over the flame until it sizzled and turned golden brown. Then he inserted the pill into the bowl of the clay pipe, placed the mouthpiece between his lips, and tilted the pipe over the lamp. He inhaled. The smoke filled his lungs. He held it for a count of 15. Then a second inhalation. 15 more seconds. Then he lay back and waited. In 1866, a visiting journalist named Mark Twain wrote a letter to the Sacramento Union about a den much like this one. He described the same ritual, the same 2 slow breaths, the same pause. Then the walls began to shift. Twain wrote that the shanty ceiling became a palace roof. The wooden planks became silk hangings. The noise of the street became distant music. He called it a dream, but a dream that felt more real than waking. An 1879 medical journal called it the divan sleep. The doctors noted that the smoker entered a state of half-dreaming. The mind drifted. The body grew still. The hours passed without notice. Ah Sing felt the warmth spread from his chest to his fingers. He saw the lamp glow split into 100 tiny lights. Above him the tailor's shop creaked. Customers came and went, but here in the silence nothing moved except the smoke. The year 1882 changed everything. The Chinese Exclusion Act shut the door on new arrivals. The labor gangs stopped coming. The men who had filled the dens began to age and fade. By 1890, San Francisco's Chinese population had fallen from 22,000 to just 14,000. Ah Sing saw the change in the den. The bunks stayed empty. The pipes grew cold. The city seized on the decline. In 1885, the San Francisco Health Department issued a report that called opium dens diseased nurseries. The report claimed the smoke weakened the lungs. It said the close quarters spread tuberculosis. It blamed the dens for everything from blindness to madness. The language was sharp. The intent was clear. Shut them down. The Crusaders found their symbol in the dens. Anti-Chinese newspapers printed drawings of white men lying beside Chinese smokers. They called it a national disgrace. The police raided more often. The fines grew higher. In 1889, the San Francisco Chronicle reported the arrest of a widow named Mrs. Dong. She had run a den in a cellar on Pacific Street. She said she did it to feed her children. Her husband had died in a railroad accident. She had no other work. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in the county jail. The story ran on page 3. No one raised money for her defense. Ah Sing watched the old customers drift away. Some disappeared into the county hospital. Some were deported. Some just stopped coming. The den behind the tailor's shop grew quieter every month. The lamp still burned, but there were fewer hands to hold the pipe. The earthquake struck at 5:12 in the morning on April 18, 1906. Ah Sing was sleeping in the bunk behind the tailor's shop when the floor lurched. The lamp fell. The walls groaned. He heard brick and timber collapse above him. He crawled through the closet and into the street. Chinatown was already broken. Buildings leaned into each other. Fires started in a dozen places at once. By nightfall, the flames had swallowed Grant Avenue. The Palace of 9 Jewels, a den that had operated since 1865, burned to the ground. On Jackson Street, the Ming Star collapsed into its own cellar. The Golden Vine, hidden beneath a noodle shop on Commercial Street, filled with smoke and then with fire. No one dug for survivors. There was no time. The city burned for 3 days. When the ash settled, nearly every den had vanished. The tunnels were filled with rubble. The false walls were gone. The clay pipes cracked in the heat. The city rebuilt quickly, but it did not rebuild the old Chinatown. The new buildings had basements used for storage, not smoke. In 1910, the city conducted a survey of remaining opium dens. The report listed 2 functioning dens. 2. In 1875, there had been more than 400. The earthquake had done what the police could not. It erased the hidden world. Ah Sing left San Francisco that summer. He took nothing with him. The pipe stayed in the rubble. The lamp stayed buried. The silence that had once been thick with smoke was now just silence. In 2012, a construction crew began digging a new sewer line on Clay Street. The work was routine. The ground was hard. But at 751 Clay Street, the backhoe hit something that was not dirt. A layer of charcoal, a pocket of ash, and then the small curved shape of a clay pipe. And neologists from the city arrived within days. They set up a careful grid. They sifted the dirt in buckets. The site became known as the SF Chinatown dig. It was the first excavation of a gold rush-era opium den in San Francisco. They found a fragment of a Meissen porcelain pipe bowl. The pattern was blue and white. The glaze still shone beneath the grime. Meissen porcelain came from Germany. It was expensive. The man who owned this bowl had taste, or he had money, or both. They found a yen shi scraper. The blade was brass. It was small, meant for scraping the residue from inside a pipe. The residue was opium tar. It was called yen shi. Addicts saved it. They could smoke it again in desperate times. The scraper was stamped with a name, Tung Hing, and a date, 1873. Tung Hing was a manufacturer in Guangzhou. The scraper had traveled 9,000 miles to end up in a sewer trench on Clay Street. They found a tin. It was rusted shut. An X-ray showed what was inside. A lump of hardened opium. The tin had held about an ounce, enough for a week. Enough for a dream. The artifacts were cleaned, catalogued and stored. They sit now in boxes at the San Francisco Presidio. But something else came out of the ground that day. Not a thing. A line of poetry. R. Singh had written a letter in 1885. It survived in a family archive. The last line read, "The pipe's smoke goes up and disappears. So does our time here." Archaeologists did not find R. Singh's pipe. They could not. But the pipe they found might have been his, might have been anyone's. That is the point. The pipe's smoke goes up and disappears. So does our time here.